It is May 31st, 2023. We're here at High Hopes on Townwoods Road in Old Lyme, and we are having a conversation as part of the project we're doing to capture an oral and video history of High Hopes. We're doing this in conjunction with our upcoming 50th anniversary. And I'm here with Tia Smith and Judy Lovelace. Thank you for talking to us, to me. And if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourselves and maybe just a brief, what your involvement with High Hopes has been.
Okay. Well, I'm Judy Lovelace, and I received a phone call one day. And when I picked up the phone, this woman on the other end said, "Mrs. Lovelace." Now, at that time, I was about 25, and Sis Gould was a woman who had called. She said, "I understand that you liked horses, and you like to ride. I want you to come out to see a program with Betty Green's class." And we lived in Essex, and so I knew Betty Green, and I went.
And Judy, will you just explain who Betty Green was?
Betty Green was the teacher at Essex Elementary School for, I call them gifted children, but they're gifted in a different way than most people, but they are special kids. And it was an integrated class, so different ages, and anyway.
So Sis Gould phoned and extended that invitation to come see Betty Green's class ride.
Yeah. And the question was, would I be interested? Well, all I had to do was look and say, yes, this is absolutely unbelievable. I love what you're doing, and sign me up. And that was the beginning. And Sis never was Mrs. Gould again, and I was never Mrs. Lovelace again.
And Tia, if you would introduce yourself.
I'm Tia Smith, and I started volunteering in 1991, and I have been a sidewalker and a horse leader, and now I help with the benefit, but I that's what I've been basically doing. But my claim to fame was the year 1995, when I recruited the 1,500 volunteers for the Special Olympics. The World Games Special Olympics were held here as far as equestrian only. All the other Olympics were in New Haven, except for sailing. But anyway, that was a full commitment job.
And
Kitty said, "Oh, it'll just take a little time."
And Tia, so going, to contrast that, Judy getting that call,
Yes.
and it must have been 1974, directly from Sis of, do you want to come see maybe be a first volunteer, to then 95, you said, the World Games?
Yes, but in 91, I was between jobs, and I was trying to think of what I wanted to do with my life, and I thought, while I'm between jobs, why don't I do some volunteer work? And I've always believed that pet therapy was effective, and this spoke to me.
And what was, so to contrast that, 1974, a personal phone call, one volunteer at a time, to now you're trying, how many volunteers did you need at the World Games?
1,500.
And how difficult was it? And did you get a sense that in the community by that point, people were like, oh, High Hopes, or...
Well, a great deal of it was done in New Haven, but when they got on campus, that was my charge, to sort of put people... Well, I'm not sure what I did, but it was a matter of getting the World Game to happen, with the grounds being taken care of and the horses being managed. It was all done by volunteers, and then also with the actual games themselves. And I have some stories about that. But anyway, that was that period. But I started as a sidewalker and a horse leader. That's how I got into it.
And it's probably important that we recognize Elsie Vera, Lower Connecticut Valley Riding Association, and I mean that was truly a community event. And the fact that, well, there was Lois Fitzgerald who came into our house and took all the notes. And so our den became an office for Elsie Vera. And then we also had, lost my train of thought.
And was Sis calling it Elsie, calling
Elsie Vera,
her
Lower
group
Connecticut Valley
Elsie Vera
Educational.
from the get-go when
yes.
she contacted you?
Mhm,
Okay.
mhm. And Mariana Pfeiffer eventually said, you know, this is much too cumbersome. And so we had a contest to see who was going to come up with the best name. And Cookie Strong did that.
You have just answered a question that some of the researchers have been, who are doing the actual timeline for the website, have not been able to find.
You're kidding.
No,
Oh.
they had they had a sense or their guesses about who had won.
Yeah.
So that's great.
Yeah.
And so one with renaming Elsie Vera High
I
Hopes.
hope so, yeah. And it just made such sense. I mean, once we all came together with it, we thought, oh, of course, this is perfect, just perfect.
And what year was that, do you think?
dear.
Ballpark?
I would say 19, maybe 80,
Okay.
somewhere. I you know,
Right, so it was quite a few years as
Oh, yeah.
Elsie Vera.
Mhm.
And when you first were working with that original group and was
and right.
do you recall Sis ever saying, you know, what was her experience? How did she even think to start this organization?
Because she'd been in England, and she also loved to carriage drive. And when she was in England, she learned about the therapeutic riding program there. And she came home, and Lit had just retired from Purnell School. And so he said, okay, Sis, now you can do your therapeutic riding. And she came home, and, you know, Grace Hamilton got involved, and all of kind of the movers and shakers of Essex and Old Lyme just said, yes, this is something we want to do. This is going to be important.
And then both of you had, you know, your first experiences here were as sidewalkers. Tia, do you remember the first time that you arrived to this property, the sidewalk, and what your impression was?
Actually, I didn't. I just sort of walked in, and the first thing they had me do was stuff envelopes for the for the
Symphony?
well, maybe it was that, but it also could have been for the ask. You know, and my stuffers were Bernie Slater, and she was one of the Bernie Siegel's cancer survivors, and I learned so much about attitude, and you know, she had beaten cancer for 100 years and whatever. I mean, that was an inspiration in itself. But no, I don't remember the first time I sidewalked, but I do remember I had some specific riders that absolutely changed my life.
And who would some of those riders be?
Pat Burns. That's the one I really should talk about, because for years, and I still see her, Pat Burns had MS, and when she first came to High Hopes, she was walking, you know, and she is now flat on her back. But she went through 3 horses. In other words, Carolyn Jagelski was the therapist with her, and she made changes in horses depending on what Pat needed. Is this the time to tell a story about Pat?
I think it is.
Well, when she wanted to jump. Now, jumping is a problem for insurance, for anything. But she really did want that, and she was on a little horse named Chaucy, I think, Chaucette. I think she was a little Morgan, not a Morgan, but a quarter horse. Well, I'm a sidewalker, and somebody's on the other side. Carolyn Jagelski is the instructor and therapist, and I think Emily was actually driving the horse at that point. Well, we jumped, but that meant we all jumped. Everybody had to go over the jump. It wasn't a big jump, but the horse tucked his legs, and it was taken on video. Kitty was pretending she didn't know what was happening because it did not follow the instructions at all. And it changed Pat's life. It was a goal, and it happened. And it was really terrific. I mean, that kind of joy just doesn't happen to people who are in trouble, and it happened.
That's great.
That's a wonderful story. That's great.
That's great.
That sort of thing.
And Judy, do you recall like your first actual experience as a sidewalker, or that?
What happened with me basically was that it was the beginning of a new phase for me. That the kids were growing up, and I was not working, and so it was a case of, well, what can I do to volunteer? And so our house and our Volkswagen bus became the vehicles that were used, because we went from one barn to another barn to another barn. And it took a while, but we finally said, you know what? This is crazy. I said, sis, we don't want to be nomads. We want to have a presence. And so that's when this started. And I have to say, though, that every volunteer, every person who had a horse that was suitable for the program, they all came and just said, here's our horse. We will move them, we will do what we need to do, because this is really important. And that was the beginning.
And where were some of those properties that you were moving around?
Well, Kingswood, and in Westbrook, and I can't remember now, Sis is first, absolutely, yes, thanks, Johnny. Yes, and Sis gave us everything we needed. It was absolutely wonderful.
Sis's would have been in line on
Mount Archer.
Mount Archer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then so Sis's Westbrook is Westbrook Hunt
Westbrook
Club?
Hunt Club. Mm-hmm. Patty Peoples. We were there for a while. We were at Race Hill for a while. We were at in Chester. Carol. Can't remember her last name right now. Anyway, and it was just wonderful. I mean, people would trailer their horses for miles, and
So
the
at
love of everybody.
And so at that point, it was it still primarily school children, or was it now expanding and mixing too? So, so what the participants, what kind of range of participants, ages, abilities?
Well, we had, we were very fortunate that Essex Elementary School wanted to back us. We were fortunate that the old Lyme schools said, yes, there is a place for this. Individuals heard about us. I mean, I'll never forget Carolyn Jagelski, who was a physical therapist, and she said she had heard about High Hopes, and a father came with his son, and he was terrible cerebral palsy, and they asked whether and I can't remember his name, is right on the tip of my tongue, but anyway, what was his name, Johnny?
I wasn't listening.
Oh, terrible.
Let's bring Johnny and Lee.